At once they left their nets and followed him. There's so much packed into this simple sentence that dramatically changed the lives of Peter and Andrew. It affected their livelihood, their families, their future, their salvation. They were willing at that moment to say, this man, whom I don't really know, will somehow fill the void left from me leaving my job. Somehow, this man will offer me something so that my family and I don't starve. I'm so certain of this man, they were saying in their minds, whom I really don't know, that I'm willing to stake my life on whatever it is that he has to offer, even though I have no idea what that might be. It would be almost an unreasonable thing to do if their hearts had not been so clearly moved by his presence. So much is not captured by these words in our gospel. So much falls between the lines. You know, from time to time, I catch myself as I'm getting ready in the morning doing my hair, and I look in the mirror and I see myself wearing, the black shirt and the little white tab. And from time to time, I think to myself, how in the world did this happen? How did it happen that I am now a priest? I think of all the nets that I personally left behind in my life, all the things that gave me a sense of security and protection, all the things that I thought I needed in order to survive. I was 18 when I went off to seminary, and I didn't have anything figured out at the age of 18. I didn't know what seminary was. I didn't know exactly how to tell my friends. I didn't know how my family would pay for my education. I didn't know anything. I was certain of only one thing, that God was calling me. It is the only thing I was certain of, that God was calling me. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't have told you how it happened, what it sounded like, what it felt like. All I knew is that God was calling me. And so I left my nets. I left my desire for a family. I left a girl that I really cared for, a group of friends that I really loved, and I followed him. Not because I could explain why, but because it was the most reasonable thing to do. And the more I think about how my vocation unfolded and continues to unfold, I have concerns sometimes about how willing we are to respond to God's call in our lives today. Today, I'm afraid that we want to understand all the factors before we go. We want details on how things are going to happen, how much it's going to cost, and how much it will benefit me. We want to know the sacrifices that it will entail so that we can, according to our own measure, decide whether or not the sacrifice is worth it. And I can tell you that after 10 years of being vocation director, that while these fears are present in the minds of young men who are discerning the priesthood, they are far stronger in the minds of their mothers. And it is often the parents' refusal to leave their nets behind that prevents their sons from following God's call in their life. Instead, too often, they trap their sons in the nets of their own fears because they don't trust him. They don't believe that God can make them happy in the priesthood. It's a reality that we have to deal with in our church today. We need young men to respond to God's call to follow him into the priesthood. But it doesn't just rest on the shoulders of young men. It rests in the hearts of parents to trust what God is doing in the hearts of their sons. It rests on parishes to be places of hope and joy where men will want to serve. It rests on sisters and uncles and aunts to be understanding and prayerful so that these men will feel supported as they seek to respond to what's happening in their hearts. Priests are real men that come from real families and real parishes who need real friendships and real communities who show them the possibility of a beautiful life of loving service. For the sake of God's people and the world, we need to drop the nets that say that worldly success is the only way to happiness. We need to drop the net that says that sexual activity is necessary for true love. We need to drop the net that says it is unreasonable to follow Christ unless He completely explains everything to you up front. Friends, all of these nets trap our young people and prevent them from following the joy that God is offering to them. The decision is hard enough. It's hard enough to discern a vocation to the priesthood or religious life in our culture today. It's hard enough. The church shouldn't be adding to that difficulty. We as a community of faith shouldn't be making it harder for young men and women to discern their call, God's call in their life. We have to let go of the measure and the mind of this world and adopt the measure and the mind of Christ. For our sake and for the sake of our young men and women discerning God's call. It is true of every vocation in the church. And whether we've discovered our vocation or we're still searching for it, friends, all of us have to ask whether or not we really trust the Lord enough to follow. Even if we don't know where He's taking us. Do we love Him enough? Do we trust Him enough to believe that He can give us happiness in a way that this world cannot? It's not just a question for young people. It's a question that all of us have to answer for the sake of our young people, so that we can be a place where they are strengthened and fed by the presence of God. So that when He walks by their seaside and calls their name, they will know His voice, and they will know that He is leading them to joy. May God help us to be a good and holy community of faith.